Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Incomplete Skeptic, Sober Wise Guy series. Here we explore the stories of people in long-term sobriety. We get to hear what they were like, what happened, and what they're like now. The unexamined life is not worth living is a renowned maxim ostensibly spoken by Socrates at his trial for impiety and debasing youth, for which he was subsequently sentenced to death. Not very cheerful, right? Well, today's guest is a fellow who has not only examined his life, but has undergone a profound transformation and alteration to his reaction to life. So, in a manner of speaking, it's like the old self died, I guess. We can always resurrect it if we go back and do something silly like drink again. But our guest today, I first met in a 12-step recovery group called OMD, which is short for Outright Mental Defectives. Our paths cross in other places from time to time, such as Gopher State Roundup, which is a huge recovery event where thousands of people in recovery gather to hear speakers share their experience, strengths, and hope with us. So we can either get or stay sober. Well, time to introduce you to my guest. It's Darrell B. Darrell, welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic, Sober Wise Guy podcast.
Thanks, Tim.
You're welcome. I appreciate your being here. So let's, without any further ado, what's your sober date, and then tell your story.
It is okay, sure. My name is Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 8th, 1981. So this is being recorded on June 14th. So it was 6 days ago.
Yeah, congratulations.
And to save you the trouble of doing the math, that's 43 years ago.
Thank you.
And yeah, so I guess what I'm charged with here is to tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what life's like now. And maybe we'll talk about a few of the finer points towards at the end, and that should be it.
Perfect. Okay, sounds great.
All right. So the first thing I will tell, like I'll tell you my story like I'm at a podium.
Cool.
And the first thing I do is say, I come to you tonight from my home group. That is the Outright Mental Defectives. It's a big book study group that meets every Wednesday night in St. Paul. And what we do there is we laugh a lot, we cry a little, and we talk about God. And I've
Amen.
found that all those things are necessary parts of a life well lived. So the other thing is I have a sponsor, and I've had that same sponsor since I was sober for 11 years. So what is that math?
Wow.
32 years.
Dang.
So yeah, we've grown old together is what that is. And the other thing that I mentioned is I have a home group, and that is the place where I go every week. I show up. If I'm missing, somebody is calling me and saying, Darrell, we didn't see you. Where are you? And that is me being in connection with my fellows. And I'll get to why that's important a little later on. And so, I get up here and I talk about my home group and what it's like. And it's pretty clear that I like it. I've been going there for 30 years. And so my encouragement to anybody that's listening is to get that home group. And if you are at a meeting where you're not going to get up at the podium and talk about how awesome it is, then you should find another meeting and keep looking until you find that meeting. Because those are people. And Part of it is I have this disease that wants to separate me. And so in order to arrest it, I need to be a part of. And I can't do that sitting at home by myself. So to tell you a little bit about what it was like, so I was born and raised in St. Paul, and um, normal parents. My mom worked in a factory, my dad worked in a warehouse. Um, they came home, and a child of the 70s. So it was that thing that you see on Facebook where, hey, go on outside and play and come home when the street lights are on, that kind of a childhood. And I have one sibling, but she is 13 years older than me, and she got married when she was 18. So from, 5 on, I was kind of raised like an only child. And I will say that going to school, the thing that I didn't like it. And my problem was I had this feeling like everybody kind of knew something that I didn't. And they were following a script that I didn't have, and I didn't know how to fit in with that. And the analogy that I always use is, when you're in first grade and you get that orange construction paper and those little silver scissors, and they have you cut an orange out. And I looked at yours, and it was this kind of perfect circle, and mine had these like kind of straight cuts that went around. And so um, it didn't look anything like that. Like I was like not clear on the assignment somehow, or just didn't do it, and just always felt um, just like I was one step behind everybody. I'm I'm fairly smart. And so um, one of the things that I did was I was like this class clown, always making jokes. Because like the information that they taught you, like I got that. And so I would kind of goof off. And one of the things that they did to kind of reel me in was, so I clearly get this, and I'm goofing off when they're trying to teach some of the kids that are struggling with it a little bit. So they had me helping out those kids. And so, I'm working with this guy, this kid, and it's like, hey, my sister's having a party this weekend. Maybe you should come over. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so I do that. And it's Friday night. I got my allowance for the week, flush with $5. And it turns out this kid's mom, I know now, is an alcoholic. But what she would do is she would gather up money from all the kids, go to the liquor store, keep the change, and buy her own drink. And so I'm in. I don't know anything about alcohol, nothing. But I've heard my mom say that every now and then she likes a slow gin fizz. So I had her get me a half pint of slow gin and drank that down. And suddenly I was charming. People wanted to hear what I said. It's funny. I could talk to girls. And this was it. Like, how did I not know this? Now you can imagine and I was probably 12 years old at the time. So like I get an allowance of $5 a week. Like, how am I gonna like I need to do this as much as I can and as often as I can. And so we did the thing where like the parents' liquor bottles where you pour that out and you um, pour some water back in. And like that only goes so far. And one of the things I found was um, drugs. Like it's as a 12-year-old, it is far easier to get drugs than it is to get alcohol. And, a man of limited means. So one of the things that I started doing was selling at, at my school. And so we would do things like, I would go to lunch at leave the school and go to somebody's house, and we'd raid the liquor cabinet and pour a little bit of whiskey into a can of Coke and go back with whiskey Cokes to school. And um, life was good. Like I was making a little bit of money, enough money that I could um, drink regularly, and it just was awesome. And at some point, I got to the point where I was selling more and more and more. And the life-changing thing was I went into business as a vendor at the fair, an unofficial vendor, but that kind of rocketed my business to the next level. And so I kind of became the guy at school that everybody knew. And um, so I could get into the parties. I was kind of a little hustler. So I would do things like I bought a tap for a keg so that whenever anybody had a party, they would invite me and I could use my tap and I would get a free cup. And then I started buying the kegs by having somebody buy the kegs and selling the cups myself. And so just all these little hustles to do things. And and life was good. Like nobody was any the wiser to any of this, and life was fantastic. Um, and then I got to be, when I was about 15, about to turn 16, looked old enough that I could go to the liquor store, certain liquor stores, I should say. And so the routine was to skip out at lunchtime and go down the street to the liquor store, and we get a pony pack of OE 800 and sit out in the baseball stadium and drink it in the afternoon over our lunch hour and go back to school. And I did that. Um, Once I went and got some for some other kid who got hammered and turned me in. And so there's kind of like the starting of the consequences where they're coming to get me and saying, so and so said that you went to the liquor store and bought him booze, and now he's drunk and his parents are coming to get him. And that got me on the radar screen. And so they started watching me. And um, the trouble at school, I ended up getting suspended for selling drugs and liquor to kids at school. I ended up moving kind of up the ladder, if you will, in the drug culture, and the adults that I was buying things from were like giving me stuff to like, hey, you should sell this for us too. And so I, of course, had to try all these things. And so let's see here. So when I was 15, I overdosed for the first time. And at 16, I just in January of 1981, that is when everything went south for me. So New Year's Eve, ended up in the hospital from alcohol poisoning. drank something called snowshoe grog without eating anything, and um, just not good. And that's kind of the thing that I was discovering. I know now that like once things started, I could have an awesome time, or I could end up in the hospital, or I could end up in jail. And I couldn't tell you what was going to happen. Like all the circumstances might point to a great time, and yet here I am in the hospital, or um, might like this is not going to be good, and it could be the most awesome night ever. But yep, so overdosing in the fall of 1980, hospital 1981. I got out of the hospital, and then I had a part-time job, and I was drinking at work, and I fell down some stairs and ended up in the hospital again. And I ended up getting arrested um, with a whole bunch of drugs. And then a couple weeks later, I got arrested for burglary. And like the way that it works out is that like when I overdosed in the fall, it was like, oh, that was just a bad experience. And then like a few months later, it was okay, I'm never gonna drink and not eat. But these things started happening faster, and then I could really like make up these stories to justify them. So the way I put it is the truth was coming faster than I could make up lies to be able to live with it. And so this burglary thing, and then after that I was kicked out of school again, and that was for not going. So I'm, you know, 16 years old, the spring of 1981, and this burglary charge, they give me an option, right? You can go get an assessment, and if you have some kind of problem, we can take care of that. You can go to treatment, or you could go to court and likely go to jail till you're 18. And like, I gotta tell you, like, that seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, so you're gonna go away for a month or two and then come back, or you could live incarcerated for, a little over a year. And it was kind of a thing because throughout my high school years, periodically these kids would disappear. And occasionally one of them would come back and like, yeah, my parents put me in treatment. And it was, it was cool at first. They fed you some meals and it was all right, but then they started messing with your head and trying to brainwash me. And so like I had this vision of like, do I want to go be like psychologically tortured, or do I want to, like that's kind of the because like you tell people like I had to think about this, and they're like, that sounds like crazy talk, Darrell. But when you explain that frame of mind where I literally thought I was going to be psychologically tortured for 2 months versus just being able to kind of live my life in confinement, um, was the calculus that I was making. And the kind of the watershed thing was I went to an evaluation. So here's the thing, right? So if ever a person had a reason to um, not drink, not drug, not do anything, and be completely sober, it's when you go for the evaluation to learn how long you're going to like, am I going to go to long-term treatment or regular treatment or maybe outpatient? And to show up and be talking to this guy and have him kind of um, like look over at your parents and go, well, I don't know what it is, but he's on something right now. So, um, and I was the cool guy who wore the glasses that were tinted kind of pink. So these rose tinted glasses, so you couldn't tell, if my eyes were red or anything like that.
Mine
So
are blue blockers, Darrell, just so you know I have been smoking weed or anything.
yeah, yeah, and I've got those on now, the blue
Mhm.
light filter. But yeah, so like here's somebody who kind of knew everything and like could see right through the stories that I was telling everybody to kind of be able to live my life. And so yeah, I ended up going to treatment on June 8th. So that was a Monday. And my last drink was a 6-pack of Lowenbrow beer on June 7th, 1981. And I went there and I thought I'm gonna play along and I'm gonna do this, and everybody's kind of gonna get off my back, and I'll like be able to get back to those old days when it was cool. And one of the other things that was happening was I would have these episodes where I thought of it as time traveling, where I would be talking to somebody and then I would kind of like be somewhere else in the future, 20 minutes, an hour, couple hours, don't know. Um, remember being in a party in a basement and taking a swing at a guy and my fist glancing off his head and hitting the wall and thinking, ow. And then I woke up in some bushes, or next thing I know, I was in some bushes and I had no idea where I was. And it turns out that I was the neighbor across the street from my parents. I was in their backyard laying in some bushes behind their house. And it took me a while to figure out exactly where I was in the world. And another time, woke up, came to in a conversion van, a 1970s conversion van, going through the drive-through of a Burger King in like East St. Paul with people I had no idea who they were. Like, it was clearly, once I started asking questions, it was clear that like it was a friend of a friend and they knew I was kind of the guy. So they were like, hey, we're going to get some burgers. Do you want to go with us, young man? And, I must have said yes and took off and kind of woke up with strange people where I didn't really know where I was. And so that kind of thing was happening as well. And so I go to this treatment center and I'm gonna stop that kind of stuff from happening. No more overdosing or hospitals, no more this crazy not knowing where I'm at kind of stuff or who I'm with. That's dangerous. So everything is good. Like I'm going through there and they're talking about these steps and I'm thinking, um, like, just no way. Like, I mean, I'm like mouthing the words and listening to what they're telling me to say and watching other people who are ahead of me and kind of mimicking them, but like was not buying this. And after a few weeks, I got the idea. the idea, like, so they have you write your 4-step down, all the things that you've done, and then you tell the pastor, and if he approves, then you can get out. And just not having any of this, and having a roommate who came in after me, we'd sit up at night and trade funny stories and um, kind of tragedies and things like that. And so I started writing down Troy's things under my 4-step. And so my first 4-step in treatment was this mixture of truth and a bunch of Troy's stories. And I got this idea from people that you needed to bring up some tears in order to really, really sell it well to Pastor Dave. And so while I was talking, I was biting and bit the inside of my cheek until my eyes watered. And so this mixture of me, my roommate, and crocodile tears, if you will, got me out of there. But they did not think that I was going to do well. So after getting out of treatment, then I went to intensive outpatient for a couple months. And that was one of the places where they had the talk. There were 20 of us in there. And so somebody was in there and said, there's a 5% chance that you'll make it to 5 years. So being kind of a smart guy, 20 people, 5% chance, that means one of us is going to make it to 5 years. And it's clearly going to be Kathy. That girl got it going on. She has drunk the Kool-Aid. And yeah, and after that, they still didn't think that I had what it took to kind of live in society. So I went to a halfway house. So this is my whole summer. It's fall now. And so spent, all of June and part of July in um, treatment, and then half of July and up to half of September in um, this outpatient thing. And then it, like, I got to go back to school. Like, I'm a senior in high school. So they're talking about whether I could go to school or not. And they were like, probably not. So go to a halfway house. So I went, it was called Sherburne House, and it's still there. It is a nunnery on, what is it, Charles and Gaultier. So it's an all women's halfway house now. And I had a tutor there. So I got the credit for going to group therapy, occupational therapy, going to class there. They did something where in the afternoons we would have work for family. So I would go around in the September and October and mow people's yards, and in October would rake the leaves, and in the wintertime we'd shovel snow, but I got credit for that. So I ended up graduating early. But the thing is this is all in St. Paul. So I'm all kind of around the area. So I've been to, like when I was an outpatient, I was going to meetings, and there was a kid that I used to hang out with, and Tony, and he'd been sober for almost a year. And so I'm like, hey, I'm in treatment. I got to go to meetings. Do you know anything about this? And he's like, oh yeah, I go to meetings. I'll take you. So I started following him around. And remember, I said like all these kids, like periodically one would disappear and sometimes one would come back and talk about the craziness. But all those kids that disappeared that didn't come back, they were at the meeting. So I walked in there and with my friend Tony, and I knew a whole bunch of people and they all knew people. And so I kind of had this ready fellowship. And that was for me, that was super helpful. Um, because like to go anywhere, to do anything, like I always had like I had these people that I knew that I could count on to be with me. And Tony, like I'm like, okay, maybe you should be my sponsor. And so, and like I know nothing about this. Like I'm kind of like playing along, mouthing the words, watching what other people do. And, the phrase is learning how to talk the talk. And so we kind of did this step thing, and Tony knew like a little more than I did. And I, but the upshot was I did another fourth step and a fifth step. And like Tony would have known that the Troy stories aren't real. So like it was all me and um, didn't really, you know, really get to the heart of things. And so, um, yeah, but there was enough of me and like, so then went through the steps in treatment, stayed sober, went through them again, like another 6 months later, a little more of me in there. I did it a little better than I did it in treatment, although the bar was pretty low. And so, um, but that's kind of been, that'll be a recurring theme is to do these things badly, but good enough, and then do them better, and then go back and do them better and go back and do them better. So when I know better, I can do better. And there seems to be no end to better, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, and like I had this group of friends. I lived in the halfway house that was kind of, it was in Frogtown, but um, everybody that I knew was in the Midway and Merriam Park neighborhoods, so it wasn't terribly far away. And one of the fruits of making a lot of money when I was 16 years old is so in 1981, I was able to buy a car. So I bought a 1978 car, which, if you think about it in 2024, like a 16-year-old kid getting his license and going out and buying a 2021, Honda Civic. So, like, a lot of money. And didn't have to work or anything for a while. And so life was, again, good. And, I was kind of gonna like just get out of trouble and go back and do this. And over that winter from 1981 to 1982, that first year of sobriety, so like 6 months in December, so January, February-ish, so 7 or 8 months, one of those kids went back out and was using in January, and he went to a party, tied one on, was going home, passed out. So might have like laid down for a minute, but he froze to death.
Hmm.
So the thing is his death certificate said that, John died of hypothermia. but really like that's untreated alcoholism is what that was. But here's a kid who like just like me, and he's dead. And another one of these kids that I hung out with, and he was the kind of the local guitar hero and had a band and was like just the coolest kid. And he committed suicide. Like he was going to meetings and seemed to be all right, and then just he's dead. And these guys that I was running with, remember I was buying kegs. Well, I knew somebody whose brother worked at the one of the breweries, and they would get us kegs at a steep discount. So that's how I made money. But that guy from the brewery um, got shot that winter too. Or actually, that was in March. And then two of the guys that I would hang out with, they were twin brothers, and one of them was stabbed at a party, and it was mistaken identity. They meant to get his brother, but like he's gone. So like here's these kids that are doing what I'm doing, and like every once in a while, like they're dying. There's somebody that's not making it. And so that was kind of a little bit of a wake up call.
Is that
And
the show me your friends and I'll show you your future concept?
right,
Mhm.
yeah. And one of the things that had happened was um, all this therapy and treatment and more treatments and halfway house. Like, and my parents, my mom works in a factory, my dad works in a warehouse. Like, they ran out of money. Like, they couldn't pay for any of this. So, what they did was they emancipated me during, like, in late 1981. So, I was a ward of the state when I was living at that halfway house. And so, as my time is coming up, I'm a ward of the state, and what the my social worker decided was that I needed to live in a foster home until I was 18, which was the following summer. So after I got out of that halfway house, I lived in a foster home. It was this guy, and he was a biker, and like it was crazy. Um, there were one, two, three, four of us kids with him, and then he rented out two other rooms to a couple of his biker friends. So they would kind of come over, and I might come home and find Harley in the kitchen table in the backyard, and a Harley up on two milk crates being worked on in the kitchen, or some random person sleeping on the couch. And as long as I went to meetings and didn't drink, like I had all the freedom. And the biker, he was my counselor in the halfway house.
Hmm.
So there was a relationship there that, not like, well, they took this kid and put him in a foster home with like a single biker guy, but he was the counselor. So I had that relationship. And yeah, like I went to town. Like I would hang out and go to meetings and hang out with people. We would go to, you know, these all night restaurants like Perkins or the Embers, and, after meetings, and stay out there all the time. And remember earlier, I was like, I got a sponsor, and I've had him since I was 11 years sober. That was when I first met him. And he was actually kind of crazy. Like, I think I'm going to stay away from him. Like, I don't think I want to hang out with him. Bad things happen when he's around. Like, so, um, Yeah. So while he was sober, he was wild, and like I kind of had trained trained myself to like be unnoticed. Like the best way to not get in trouble is to be forgettable to people. So I would not shout at people or do crazy things to call attention to myself. So like I had learned over the years to just be unobtrusive and not stick out in any way. And um, you know, life was good. I ended up going to school and um, working a couple part-time jobs, and my parents made a deal with me where if I paid for half, they'd pay for half. And this was in the early 80s when you could do that, when you could work a part-time job and pay your way through school. And life was good, met a woman, got married, bought a house, and probably sober for about 5 years. And this house, I bought a duplex. And what I did was I installed my sponsor, Tony, in the upstairs unit, and I lived in the first floor unit. So like every day is like an AA meeting, right? I don't need to go out. I got, me and Tony. And I don't know, probably after 2 or 3 years of that, I was going to a show with Tony at a club. And as we're walking up to the club, he says, "Now, Darrell, when we go in here, I'm going to have a beer. I don't want you to freak out or anything, but yeah." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So then we went and did this, and we sat on the back steps after the show, and I asked him about it, and he like, "Yeah, I've been what was this phrase? Imbibing the nectar of the gods since St. Patrick's Day." And I thought, and he's like, I was in my mid-teens, and it was a phase I was going through. And so I thought, I'm gonna just I'm gonna watch you for a little while. Maybe that was the phase I was going through too. I'm just gonna watch you. So by the end of June, he had dropped out of college. His wife asked for a divorce, and he moved out with the black contractor's garbage bag of two of those of clothes. So um, and he'd lost his job. So he was a valet parker, and he smashed a Jaguar.
Oh no.
So yeah, so that like this whole like, yeah, I think that was a phase. Probably not. Probably not. And I am you and you are me. So um and I hadn't really been going, I didn't really go to meetings, for that couple years. So I started going back to meetings. And by this time I was sober like 10 years. I went back to the meetings like I went to as a teenager. And I'm in my mid 20s now, so I'm like the old guy there. And these people would be like, "Hey, you're looking for a sponsor? That guy has got almost 10 years." So these kids would come up to me and be like, "I'm looking for a sponsor. Would you sponsor me?" And the rule of thumb is you always say yes. And so, I'm 9 years sober. I've kind of been talking the talk for years and kind of doing everything badly, but doing it a little better each time. And I can remember knowing how to talk the talk, right? So I would say things like, "Oh, that sounds like acceptance. You should read page 459." And then they would call me up and go, "Hey, I was reading that. It says inversely proportional. What does that mean?" So I'm on the phone and I'm like got my big book and I'm flipping through trying to find this thing that I've never read that I told them to
Mhm.
read that they don't understand and now are asking me to clarify. So that business where like, oh, I can't really do this. Like this isn't right. Um, so that guy was going to that meeting too. And he'd been sober for a little bit, almost 2 years longer than me. And we would go out to, after the meeting, we'd go to this Bridgman's and have like malts or ice cream cones and would talk about things. And he is talking about his life, but in a way that matches the things he's talking about in the meeting. I'm like, wow, like I'm a totally different person outside the meeting. Like I just say this because I know it's the right thing to say. But here's somebody who's like, oh, like at some point he had clearly stopped being crazy and started being like probably one of the most lucid people I knew.
Mhm.
And I know now that what he had was integrity, and that was something that I lacked, where the the ideals I hold and my actions are different, and his matched far closer than mine. I'm not going to say he was perfect,
Mhm.
but yeah. So I was like, uh, I hadn't had a sponsor for a few years. I was sponsoring these guys. I didn't know what to do. So I asked him to be my sponsor. And he's like, yeah, but you got to do some work. Right? So um, just that idea that I'd had about, you know, maybe this was a phase that I was going through, and like that's really kind of a first step, kind of a basic thing. Like you got to have that one down. No reservations, but you can have no reservations about that. So we talked about, you know, the the obsession, the planning, hiding drugs and alcohol all over my parents' house so that nobody could ever get all of it, and just the obsession, and then um, that loss of control, that unmanageability, where I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to end up in a squad car, or if I'm going to end up at the emergency room, or if I'm going to be like, this is the best night ever. Don't know what's going to happen. And that inability to like, you know, have a couple beers and talk to girls, right? That's the fantasy, right? I want to be comfortable in my own skin. I want to have a few beers and then I want to talk to girls. And just like it just I couldn't say that that was going to happen with any certainty at all. And more likely than not, it was not going to happen. And so we went back through the first step and kind of went through this and like, yep, I got this now. I can see I have clear enough head. I can see that this is the case. And just kind of the messed up. I talked about being like different person, like just you know, not being the kind, tolerant, and loving person to all. And so that's that idea of like um so a higher power can relieve me from this, obsession and this unmanageability. And then once I come to believe that, step two, and um step three, you turn your will and your life over. What does that mean? It means that I'm going to do all the things that follow. right? If I'm turning my will is just making a decision. Like if I decide I need to get a new job, I'm still gonna, I'm still gonna be unemployed tomorrow. But if I decide I'm gonna get a new job and then take and do all the steps that follow, the likelihood that I'm gonna get that job much higher. So step 3 is really like taking that step is actually making that commitment to do the action that follows.
You
And so,
might want to say what step 3 is, because we might have people who are unfamiliar with the steps, although I think most would be.
sure, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, how do you do that? You do these things that follow, and so really, the belief I have is that my Creator, my God, works through others. So, to the extent that I am have these defects of character where I'm intolerant and unkind and selfish, I am pushing you away. And when I push you away, I am I'm blocking myself off from God. So that 4th step is really around finding out, like, here are the things I do, and here's um, how that has manifested itself. So this thing, the selfish thing that I've done, or this thing I did because I was afraid I wasn't going to get something I think I should have. All those things end up pushing people away and blocking me off from God. And so once we get that all on paper and talk about it, and those underlying things are the important things, right? The exact nature. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So just listing what I've done isn't it. It's the nature of it. It's the reason. It's the essence of it. And it's almost always out of self-centered fear. Just if you distill it, everything can be distilled down to just that one thing: self-centered fear. I think I'm not going to get something that I deserve, or I'm going to lose something that I think that I have. And so I act in crazy, mean, selfish, um, immoral ways to make sure that I get those things I think I need. And so once we've done that, right? So then you make that decision, like, I want to have those things removed, those defects of character. And then you ask for that. And really, the thing that I'd always thought about was, like, I'm going to ask to not be, sarcastic or dishonest or selfish, like all these defects. And it was kind of like a whack-a-mole thing where, like, I could knock one down, but then something else would kind of pop up. And what my sponsor was talking about is the double negative of, don't pray to not be this. So his thing was, pray to, like, the opposite of every one of your defects, right? Has an opposite. So pray to be honest, pray to be unselfish, pray to be generous, pray to be kind and loving. And so it is much easier to in prayer ask for these things than it is to go around and say, I don't want to do these things. What's going to fill up that void? My experience is other defects. So, but when I'm literally praying to become the man my Creator would have me be, that's when I have that change. So having this thing where like I am actively asking God every day to, you know, be the man I think he would have me be. I have this new basis on life. So now all these people I've harmed, right? Selfish, self-centered, mean-spirited, stolen from, I have something to, I have a demonstration that I can make to them of how these spiritual principles are starting to work in my life. So to not change anything and just go apologize, that doesn't really do it for people. But to like, what does it talk about in the big book? I could see that his roots grasped a new soil. I
Mhm.
think that's what Bill says about meeting Abby, if I remember right. And so that's the thing, right? Is having this relationship with a power greater than myself that I'm working on and building on and able to demonstrate that in my life and be different. And I got to tell you, so the 4 step kind of gives me that A step, right? Made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So it gives me that list. And um, the idea of like step 9, made direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so, right? So there's kind of two there. For me, there were two, right? So there's these ones where like I'm going to make things right as I can, and then I'm never going to see that again. So that, you know, Lowenbrow that I drank, I stole from the restaurant that I worked at. So like I had to go back and be like, hey, I stole some beer from you and here's money. It was more than just a 6-pack, but yeah. And but like I never saw that person again. But my parents, right, still in my life. So those amends aren't just a thing, they're an ongoing lifetime. And I will tell you that I was probably, I don't know, sober 12, 13 years and was at my parents' house and maybe hadn't prayed that day. But my mom kind of pulled me aside and she's like, Darrell, you're not drinking again. And so there's that phrase in the big book, right? Every day is a day that we have to bring God's vision for us into our life.
Mm.
Every day. So like I let up on that and somebody immediately notices you are not the man that you have been becoming. You are the man that you were. And so um, the thing I talk about is willingness, uh, um, sincerity in some of these things is optional, but consistency is not. So I can pray for things. I can pray to be good to that person that I resent and not really mean it, but I need to do that consistently. And once I do, I have that consistency, I get the results. The results come through consistency, not through the depth of my belief. They come through constant action, not how well I think about this thing. So in the meetings, you've probably heard that phrase, right? I can't think myself into right acting, but I can act myself into right thinking. And so part of that action is that consistent prayer.
That's the best
It's,
I've heard it said. I'm not trying to pump sunshine, but I've always had some questions about that one and a little piece of it philosophically. And so I'm going to go back and study that part of what you just said again. So this is why I like hanging out with people that are sober longer than me. Uh,
yeah, yeah, like, yeah, so like, so I have this new basis. I've made amends, I've set things right, and I have to go through life, right, every day, um, inviting my creator in and asking for help to become the man he would have me be. And step 10, right? So I wish I could tell you like that is perfection. Like I am awesome,
Mhm.
but like prayer is not my first instinct. Trusting and relying on God is not my instinct. It's been 40 years. It's not my instinct. I have to I have to do this as a form of habit. Um, hey, if I'm traveling and I'm not like I have a little prayer mat next to my bed that I pray on, and if that's not there, like maybe I don't have to when I'm in a hotel room. Like so, like I get these stories about like this might be optional. I'm I'm camping, so I'm communing with nature, so I don't have to do this routine that I have every day. And so things happen. So I have to go back and make things right. Um, and, you know, set things right. And the thing is when I get off that track, off the beam, so to speak, um, what I start doing is blocking myself off from God. And so, in order to set things, make things right, and um, get back um, into my relationship with a power greater than myself, I've got to make things right. The other thing is, I don't know if you've heard this in meetings, but there's only one time I can ever have conscious contact with God, and that is right now. So, to the extent that I'm thinking about something that happened in the past or planning my moves when I see so and so again, you know what I'm going to say? Um, I am not here and I'm not now, and I can't have conscious contact. So step 10 really keeps me, is a step that helps to keep me focused in the present, in the here and the now. Um, keep my head and my heart where my feet are.
And it keeps your gifts clean.
Right. Yes. And then that prayer and meditation, right? So for me, um, I need to get out in the world so I can pray to be of service and, you know, like what is it the third step prayer? Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy love, thy power, and thy way of life. So, yep, I can pray to have those defects removed. But unless I'm out helping someone, like it's to no use. The whole reason is for me to be a part of. So um, that is the thing. So the prayer, I can do that, but the meditation, the listening, the hearing is actually part of doing. Like it's there's action for me involved. Like I can't sit quietly and have the answer come to me. I have to sit down and talk with different people, and like magically the answer comes. Um, but like having done all these things, right? Um, so we talk about like making a decision in step 3 to build a relationship with a power greater than myself. Steps 4 and 5, I look at the things that keep me from having that relationship. Steps 6 and 7, I ask to have those things that block me removed and replaced with the good. 8 and 9, I start to demonstrate those things in my life. And 10 and 11, I kind of work on staying present and fully there. So having done that, like I've built a relationship with a power greater than myself, a spiritual awakening, if you will. And so having had a spiritual awakening as the result of doing all these steps, now I have a simple message of hope. And that's what step 12 is all about. So that sponsor like kind of walked me through all these steps in a way that um, that made sense of the journey for me, and in a way that I could follow along and do it. None of it is difficult, but it's hard, if that makes sense. So it's hard to do this every day and be consistent. Um, but the things I need to do aren't hard at all, aren't difficult at all. So um, I will tell you that life is kind of um, goes up a little bit, it goes down a little bit, it goes up a little bit. I don't have these huge swings um, where I'm, you know, just life is so wonderful I can't tell you, and life is so horrible I don't know if I want to live anymore. But we have these ups and downs, and like so I might um, not be as diligent for a time and then get back to it, and then like life gets tough and then I get back to it. And so it's this constant we liken it to walking on a tightrope or a balance beam. Like you walk across it and you think about what you're doing and life is good, and then your mind starts to wander and you fall off and you get back on and you think about it, mind starts to wander and you fall off, and it's like that constantly. But it's the falls aren't that great and the height of it isn't that big, so it's
Not
these
so far to
small
fall then.
adjustments.
I
So
tend to fall uphill. I'm
did you
on the
say
mountain going up the mountain. As long as I fall forward, I'll probably be okay. If I fall backward, I might be in a heap of world of trouble.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, and then so but overall, right, life gets better, and there really is no end to that better. And I'm not talking about like the leaps and bounds you feel when in your first few years when you're making these like giant changes, but this is like the phrase that I've heard used is quantum leaps, where you make these small changes in your life that give you kind of much greater results than the actual change.
Nice.
So that is the story.
Well, thank you. I had a series of questions I was going to ask, but I think as you went through your story and your descriptions of the program, you pretty much answered all of them. I'm going to just take a quick peek here. Um, do you remember Ernie Larson by chance?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said pain becomes power when you hold it up to grace. Um, what does that mean to you?
Mm,
You don't have to agree with it. I'm just curious.
no. So I went to Gopher State one year, and how like no like everybody goes on Friday and Saturday, nobody goes to the Sunday morning speaker. And I went to the Sunday morning speaker, and his name was Sandy B.
Hmm, my
And
favorite speaker.
he talked about um, his daughter had been killed, and that when he was in court and being tried, he got up and said, looked the defendant in the eyes and said, "I forgive you." And so that idea of his pain and the knowledge that um, holding on to that and resenting it was going to harm him over the long run, and that pain transformed into what seems like grace, right? Forgiving your daughter's murderer.
Mhm.
actually freed him and helped him. And the thing I've heard is a resentment is me holding on to the hope for a different past.
Mhm.
And so as soon as I let that go, I am I am freed.
Sandy B is probably one of the most fortunate people uh, in the program and on the planet, maybe even, you know. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but he actually got to die in a meeting, in a 12-step meeting with the people he loves. He had a heart attack in a meeting. And, you know, and you think, wow, someone had a heart attack and they died, and you're talking about that like you're something to be grateful for. Yeah, yeah, I do. And I like to think if we die sober, we're going to be surrounded by people that love us in some way, shape, or form. And, um, you know, we might die while we're doing service work. We don't know, but it gives me a little bit of hope. You know, grateful heart can help us transcend a whole bunch of difficulties along the way. And I
Yeah,
actually heard Sandy give that speech too. So, and a couple of others, you know, I'm sure you've heard them
yeah,
multiple times. Yeah.
yeah. But the like it seems paradoxical, right?
Mhm.
That forgiving is freeing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I um I told him a story after he spoke for Friends of Lois W. in I think some city in Minneapolis. I don't remember which one, but and I told him the story of my sponsor, Mary Jo R., who had forgiven the man who drove under the influence and killed her son. And in the courtroom, she did like Sandy described, and approached the young man that killed her son and put her hand underneath his chin and looked him in the eyes and said, "I love you and I forgive you for killing my son." And I asked her how she could have done that. You know, I was sober for 90 days when I heard her tell that story. And she said, "Well, I'm in this program that believes in forgiveness, and plus I happen to be my higher power is Jesus. And in our discipline, in our tradition, we believe in forgiveness. And all traditions, anyone can do forgiveness. You can be an atheist, a Christian, Muslim, you know, all that's an outside issue. But that's how she said she did it. She said both of these things teach forgiveness. And now that my son dies, I'm going to just raise up my middle finger and tell the guy what a scumbag he is, or am I going to love and forgive him?" And so she said she had to either, you know, walk the walk or talk the talk, and she chose to walk the walk. And we can, you know, I don't mean to go into a little thing here, but little speech or something, but we can kill each other with a few words when we're really vulnerable. And this guy might have been on suicide's door. And instead of her approaching him and say, "My son's dead, you should be, and he should be walking around alive," he might have went back to his cell and killed himself, you know. But she said, "No, that's not the way I conduct myself in life." That we forgive regardless of the temperature of our hearts, and it gives us freedom. The person might not accept it, but we are free through our forgiveness. Is like forgiveness runs deeper than the offense that requires its presence. And without the offense, we have no forgiveness. So thank God life ain't fair. Thank God for, you know, our difficulties, and it gives them meaning because we decide it has meaning. So someone can forgive me, but if I don't forgive myself for what I've done to them, then I'm walking with the enemy, is what Mary Jo told me. You know,
Hmm.
rest in peace, Mary Jo. So, is there any last maybe pearl of wisdom you want to share with our audience before we begin to wrap this up?
So the the thing that I talked about, right, is early on, I got involved in the fellowship, right? So I was spending a lot of time. So when they would say things like, "We are going to Perkins or the Embers, and we are gonna hang out for an hour after the meeting, or we're going to go to Bridgman's and get a um, ice cream sundae. Like I did, sometimes I didn't have money. Sometimes I literally had $1 for a cup of coffee and would just hang out. But like being involved and like having those people like get to know you a little bit so that when you do have those times where you're like, I'm not feeling like going out tonight, like somebody will miss you because you're not doing that. Or if you want to do something, there is somebody that's going to go with you. So you don't have to, like, I would love to do this, but I don't want to do it alone. So, yeah. And so being involved, saying yes, just showing up. And you don't have to like participate fully. Like there were times when like a glass of soda or a cup of coffee were all I could afford, and everybody else is eating meals. And I'd say, oh, I ate before the meeting. And
Yep.
yeah, but hang out and like
Mhm.
that's where you get to know people and become friends with them
Yeah,
and
I think
build
that helped
this
me too.
fellowship around you.
Yeah. In the first year and a half, I went to a meeting a day at least and went out for fellowship afterwards. And for the first few months, I didn't have money. I had almost nothing. And I think that really helped me stay sober. And I got to um, get closer to people over time because trust wasn't high up on my list. And I got to trust people and I saw that they just had, sobriety, my happiness, first and foremost in their mind. And so it built up trust over time. And then eventually we acquire warm spots in our hearts for each other. And like you said, you're getting old together with your sponsor, and what a great reward for staying sober. And a different old timer said he went to the program to get sober, and now he stays sober to go attend meetings, that kind of general concept.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, sorry, I think I interrupted you. You were going to say something. Um, well, okay, I think can we call this a wrap?
Yes.
All right,
Uh,
I appreciate your time, my brother, and we'll see you in an OMD meeting. Remember, folks, it's on a Wednesday evening in St. Paul, Minnesota. If you want to check us out, it's not my home group. My home group is in Minnetonka on Mondays. But if you reach out to us on YouTube or something, just say you're interested, and I'll make sure you get an email to either myself or Darrell. If you're okay with that, if someone's looking for a meeting, and I can pass it on to you. Is
yeah,
that okay,
absolutely.
Darrell? Okay,
Yep.
okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to the Incomplete Skeptic, Sober Wise Guy. God bless you in your journey. And I really hope if you um, are needing help, you'll reach out your hand, and we'll do our best to reach out ours in your direction as well. Anytime, anywhere, anyone, anywhere reaches out for help, we want our hand to always be there. And for that, we are here. Peace out.